Yes, so welcome at this breakout session, Partnering for Change. That's the topic that we're going to talk about. And we have 4 speakers. They will all speak for around 15, 16 minutes. And there's also some time left for questions. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Menti Q&A function, the menti.com app, and use the Q&A function to ask your questions. Our first speaker is Hubert Rovers. He is CEO of European Football for Development Network, and he will talk about sport for all. Hubert Rovers, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good. Well, hello everyone online. Indeed, I work for, I'm CEO at the European Football for Development Network. We're a network that uses the social power of sport for social development. So sport for a tool and not as a mean to an end. We work with the philosophy of, well, Mr. Nelson Mandela, that sport has the power to change the world, and it can reach people that are difficult to reach for people elsewhere. Our network is a network of more than 150 professional football clubs, leagues and FAs all around Europe in 32 countries. We run programs on health, employability, education, social inclusion, environmental sustainability and good governance in sport as well. We reach about 1 million people a year with all these clubs. So our focus is also on good governance in sport, and that's my reason why I'm here, and can tell you more about that. The work that we do is in line with the Sustainable Development Goals that we follow with all these clubs on the topics that I just mentioned. So on good governance, we have a program which is called Fair Sports for All, which is a program that we run to prevent match fixing in professional football in Europe. It's an educational program for first team players, youth players as well, on academy level, that we developed in partnership with Kindred. So in our work that we do, and the work that we do with the network and all these different topics on health, education and employment, we use the power of football. But football can only be credible if you got a fair game where the end result of the game is not known for anyone until the final whistle blows. So that's why we think it's important in our good governance section to have this program as well, next to the 32 programs that we run anywhere in Europe. So the program that we've developed is based on a website and a workshop. And that workshop, I'm going to tell you a bit more about that workshop. It teaches players and academy players about match fixing. And we're developing this program for a year now. The interesting part that we realize is how little people actually know about match fixing, especially players, and the regulations that are around it and what they can and cannot do. So what we've developed is a really simple course for them to signpost the first easy signs, what they can and cannot do. And we also developed a game that is on the field itself, because these are football players. If you talk about 20 minutes, they're gonna have their attention somewhere else. So I think you know this better perhaps than I do. The definition of match fixing, it's a manipulation of a sport competition or a sports game, in any game, with the intentional arrangement to have the outcome already there before the final whistle blows. So that is where we focus on with our Fair Sports for All program. So, and especially the intentional arrangement is the big part of that, because you want to have you don't want to know the outcome, of course, before otherwise the fun of the whole game is gone. So this is the actual workshop that we give to players. So reasons for match fixing, well, of course, financial reasons is the most logical one, but other tangible access, so gifts that they can have, is a reason, but also, and this is probably one of the less well-known reasons, or the one that is commonly accepted in amateur football or amateur sports, is competitive reasons. So I will come back to that later on. But perhaps there's also a thrill around that. So this is where we focus on, and then also who are the fixers in that game. So it could be anywhere on the pitch, that try to influence that football game. And of course, it could be started especially on amateur level, on a very low level, with influence of family, friends, or that competitive reason for not relegating or trying to get into a place where it's preferable. But the bigger problem, of course, are these organized crime syndicates. So this is the case is that this is not something that happens only elsewhere in the world. It's something that happens everywhere, including in the Netherlands, and this is something that we want to make them aware of. It's because it's always not in my backyard, they think, but it actually is. So we have a number of cases that we highlight in these workshops within the Netherlands, but also on an international level. And what we then do is also highlight the disgrace of Guillaume. I'm not sure if anyone knows this example, but this was an actual football game at a World Cup where two sides didn't want to lose. They both had a silent agreement that they had within the draw that was enough for them. So people were not watching a game anymore. It was a tactical shooting ball left and right just to not lose. But to have that draw. So what we try to do during the workshop is to convince and tell players reasons to be fair. And of course, this makes sense from good sportsmanship, but it should be a self-agreement with themselves, but as a respect for the game, the club, the fans, why they do this. So what we've developed is a code of conduct that is visible online on the website, where they need to be open, so they can tell others what's happening, why if they are approached or if they see any signs. And they need to be smart, so they need to know the rules. And as mentioned, I think this is one of the weird experiences that we had, that a lot of the players don't know these rules. They're set out, they're set everywhere by UEFA, by FIFA. They're published everywhere, but still there's a very lack of knowledge there. So educating players and clubs and everyone that is linked to these organizations is an important part. And then be careful of the information that you have. And to share that with the right organizations, with the right authorities. So be responsible and be clean. So don't get involved in anything, or the risk that you can be involved anywhere. And there's certain cases already where, especially youth players, are not voluntary going into this, but they're forced into that because of things that happened in the past, because of photos that are available. And everyone is looking this from a men's football perspective, but think about a women's football perspective and how that can change in the future. The bigger the women's game get, the more risk there is as well for them to be pushed in a way that they don't want to be in. So that be safe part is a very important part of the work that we do and the way that we're going with this project. So to explain to these players the judicial aspects, we said that it's, the rules that are out there. And again, it's a lack of understanding there. So a lot of players do know that they cannot bet at the games at their own club, but it's less known that they cannot bet on games in their own division. The thing that is really not known, that they also cannot own any shares of any company that is involved. There's a number of examples out there where people are or players are fined because of that regulation in place, and that they don't know about that regulation in place. So this is for the Dutch, the workshop that we developed is now tested and piloted in the Netherlands, but it's meant to go abroad and to other countries in Europe, where in every country, although in the EU, there's certain different regulations in place. So we need to adopt and change the workshop to different countries, but the overall are accepted by UEFA and FIFA. So the ones that are in place, as mentioned, so it's forbidden to participate in any directly or indirectly betting, gambling, or lotteries, and not have any interest, as I mentioned, directly of interest or indirectly in entities and organizations that promote, broker, or arrange betting and gambling. And there's, I think, one of the most famous examples is the involvement of Zlatan Ibrahimovic in an organization like that, and he was close to getting banned for, well, perhaps for life, and perhaps he needed to be, because if you followed these guidelines, then he was, trespassing them. So this is what we tell them, and also that it's not a ban, just a ban for a year. It could be a lifelong ban where youth players are prohibited to play the famous or their preferred game. And this includes the non-respect of reporting. So doing it themselves is one thing, but actually being, if you know about it and you didn't report, that actually could be something that is already in conflict with these guidelines as well. So there's, by FIFPro, there's an app developed which is called the Red Button app, where you can report these incidents quite easily. That is included in our project, in our workshop, where they can report in any way. So and I need to go a bit faster because of time, but so the consequences are there. We need to we tell them how their environment, how fans can react, but also how they feel themselves, and we let them test the experience and the knowledge that they have on our online educational tool that we've developed and that the players can use. So because it's football players, and if I talk 20 minutes to you, then you might catch up. If you talk with football players about 20 minutes about legal stuff and things like that, it might not stick. So what we've done is developed an online game, or no, sorry, not an online game, a game on the pitch. It's where they can actually try and test to fix the match and try to find out who's fixing the match amongst them. So it's two teams, two times 10 minutes on the pitch, where they play in different settings, trying to find out, because we hand out cards, and the cards will have different assignments to them. So they have to be a clean player, they have to be make sure that they fix the game in one way or another, and then afterwards we're going to talk about that, how, if they could identify what happened on the pitch and what their reaction would be. So we've done this, as mentioned, we're in the piloting phase. We've done this now with a Dutch club, which is called Cambuur Leeuwarden, and I have a small video for you to show you there.
IFDN is een stichting die Europese professionele voetbalclubs of BVO's ondersteunt en verbindt. IFDN helpt BVO's en bonden met het opzetten van maatschappelijke programma's voor de lokale omgeving.
Ik ben Henk de Jong, trainer SC Cambuur. Dus we zijn in Leeuwarden. Prachtige stadion voor ons.
IFDN heeft meer dan 150 leden. Vandaag richten we ons op een van onze projecten, Fair Sports for All. Samen met Unibet, maatschappelijk partner van IFDN, hebben we het Fair Sports for All programma ontwikkeld omdat matchfixing een grote bedreiging is voor de sport en voor de kansspelindustrie.
We hebben een bijeenkomst met de spelers en met Unibet. En daar gaan we het hebben over gokken in de sport, maar ook het maatschappelijke natuurlijk. Hè, want het is veel groter dan alleen maar in de sport.
De onvoorspelbaarheid van sport is heel belangrijk. Wie een wedstrijd wil fixen, is hiervoor afhankelijk van de medewerking van een speler, scheidsrechter of coach. Voetballers zijn daarom kwetsbaar. Fair Sports for All richt zich op het creëren van bewustzijn over de risico's van matchfixing en het geven van voorlichting met als doel om matchfixing te voorkomen.
Dat het een maatschappelijk probleem is en dat we dat onder aandacht moeten brengen en dat we daar een rol in kunnen spelen.
Via een workshop en spel leren spelers, managers en andere betrokken partijen in de sport bewuster hoe te reageren op aanbiedingen van matchfixing en waar deze te melden. De workshop bestaat uit 3 delen. Het eerste deel is een presentatie waarin de risico's van matchfixing worden toegelicht en ook begrippen als sportfixing en matchtanking worden uitgelegd met voorbeelden. Daarna doen de spelers een quiz waarin hun kennis en hetgeen ze gehoord hebben in de presentatie getoetst wordt.
Dus het is zeker zaak dat ieder daarvan in kennis is gesteld.
Na de quiz om hun kennis te testen gaan de spelers vervolgens het veld op om een wedstrijd te spelen. Tijdens dit potje krijgen alle spelers een taak. Elk team krijgt daarna de vraag: wie waren de eerlijke spelers en wie waren er fixers?
Je ziet ook bij de spelers dat de fun van de opdracht goed te harte is genomen. Maar het is wel feit dat ze nu weten wat er kan spelen en waarvoor ze behoeden moeten worden.
Ik weet wel dat er heel veel speelt binnen de sport, dat er heel veel gefixt wordt. Maar het is goed om weer eventjes op de hoogte te zijn van wat er allemaal speelt.
Nieuwsgierig geworden? Alle leden van IFDN kunnen zich aanmelden voor deze workshop.
Good. So thank you for your time. It's well, I have a last slide, but it's not showing. But if you want to speak with me about the workshop, I'm here throughout the day. So hope to see you later. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Hubert. Please, because we also have some questions.
Yep.
If you have questions for our speakers, also for our audience here live, please use the Q&A function in the Menti app. But I've got 2 questions for you, Hubert, and maybe you can answer them quite briefly.
Yeah.
The first one is, how significant do you think match fixing is in the European market? And is this an issue that's improving or getting worse? Well, it's a very big question, small answer.
Well, I think there's a number of incidents that are known, and which probably means that there's more out there that we don't know, and therefore I think it's an important issue to discuss, to talk about, and to improve especially the knowledge of players about how to identify it and to report it back.
Yes.
Because if we don't know it, how can we tackle it?
Yes, but it is urgent.
I think it is, because it's about the core of the game. If you don't have a fair game, you don't know if you know the outcome before the game starts, what's the fun in watching it?
Yes, but it's still an unknown field, that there are no figures, it's not very visible yet.
Well, there is data out there, and then there's more and more data coming available, and I think that that's something like the conference today, but also the organizations that are here. We need to work together on that to improve.
Okay, another question. Is there enough collaboration between gambling operators and governing bodies to prevent match fixing? And if no, how can this be improved?
Okay, I think that is a really good question, because we're now operating in this area for more than a year. One of the first things that we did is mapping out all the organizations involved. And there's a lot of organizations involved, but not all of them. Well, most of them work in isolation. So I think partnerships, working together and building can really strengthen the efforts that we do and improve to tackle the issue. Yeah.
Okay. 30 seconds for the last question, Hubert. What about proving match fixing? As the most prevalent example, you mentioned Beugelsdijk.
Yeah.
But nothing happened.
Well, no, he was. Then nothing happened. It's still. He was not convicted. That's true. but nothing happened.
That's not true.
Yeah, well, yeah. From a personal perspective, we have a saying in the Netherlands: where there's fire, there's smoke, or where there's smoke, there's fire. So yeah, I'm not sure. He was not convicted. That's true.
Okay, but you say there is still an impact also from this.
Yeah, well,
case.
yeah, but I'm not sure if then we used the right one. But especially in the Netherlands, there's a number of incidents that are proven. So there's definitely things for us to do as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your inspiring story. Give him a big hand, Hubert Rovers. Thank you. Yes, because it's time now for our second speaker, Mats Enqvist, CEO and General Secretary from the Swedish Football League. There you are, Mats, and you will talk about sustainable sponsorship.
Yes.
The floor is
I will.
yours.
Thank you very much. Yep. Thank you. See if it works. There we go. That's me. You see me here and you see me there. It's fantastic. I work as the General Secretary and the CEO of the Swedish Professional Football League. That's the top two tiers in Sweden, Allsvenskan and Superettan. And why is it interesting for us to speak here? Well, we're the origin of betting because we create what you are betting on in many cases. Not just football, but it needs to be produced somewhere, and we are the producers. So what do we do? Well, we are, to understand us, since we are not in the betting industry, we're a quite small league, or at least mid-size in European measurements, but big in Sweden. We're the number one sport in Sweden, though we have hockey. We were founded in 1928, the league organization, quite old. We are almost 100 years now. And we organize the 32 top clubs in Sweden. We have a turnover around 80 million euros, you would say, and one of the biggest incomes, except media agreements, is actually from Unibet, our big partner. I'll speak a little bit about that. These are the clubs. They are situated not all over Sweden, but fairly spread over from the northern parts down to the mid and southern parts. So it's a long distance for supporters to drive between the games. But it's also very much a national entity to watch football, at least today. So Unibet is our main sponsor. We had an agreement with Svensk Spel, which actually the Football Federation founded in 1934. So we do have some experience of working together with betting companies. We actually founded the big monopoly company that's now Svensk Spel. It was called AB Tipstjänst in 1934. So we had them all the time, but in 1920 we broke the agreement, or actually they wanted to focus more on ladies football and the national team. So we searched the market when it was opened up for licensing in Sweden, and we found a very good partner in Unibet. And to be quite frank, I think there are around 90 companies that were licensed in Sweden when the market opened up for regulated companies to come in. And I would say that there were maybe 2 or 3 outside Svenska Spel that we could actually talk to. Because we set some standards, believe it or not, that it's not just about money. It's very much about how we cooperate, how we protect the values of sport, and how we take a responsible action together. So this is not just a question of economy. So what's interesting in this solution? Why is football interesting for a betting company to invest in, to be the main sponsor of the league and all the 32 clubs? Well, there's only one thing that really qualifies us to be a good partner, and this is it. to explain in Swedish there, it was singing for real, football for real. The supporter culture in Sweden is extremely passionate, and it's very big. It's one of our strongest foundations. We still have the 51% rule, so we don't have companies or oligarchs or sheiks owning our clubs. It's totally run by the members, every club in Sweden. And the financing needs to come from something. And it's obviously media agreements, sponsor agreements, but also very much member financed. So this is really important to us, the passion that we have in our fans. And to be honest, it's not unproblematic to work with a betting company. See if I get this word, yeah. So why Unibet? Some people ask us. We get challenged from time to time, even that we had a relationship before since 1934. The question opened up very much when the market was regulated. From fans, from outside people, they challenge us, and we need to stand up and explain, why do we work with Unibet? Well, there is a reason. And the reason is not just that we get a great sponsor agreement and great cooperation. We actually can do some things that we couldn't do if we didn't have a gaming company, a gambling company to work with. So why? Well, we have some direct effects that come directly because we have, I would say, the best cooperation we ever had. I'm not going to be rude to Svensk Spel. They were actually very good partners to us also in the past. But one thing changed in Sweden when legislation came and everything was sharpened up. Everything was put to the point. What do we actually accept? What's okay? So from we started to working with Unibet, the new legislation rules and the government checking on whatever is okay and not okay was set on the target. And from the first meeting we had with Unibet, they said, we're going to live up to all these regulations. So I'd say the main problems we have are images of what happened before this, because this lives on. And to be quite frank, the gambling betting industry hasn't been quite so clean all the time, but things are happening, and you have to look in what can we do now and what's going to happen in the future. Some direct effects is that we are educating, together with the funding from Unibet, all our players, all our leaders, all our staff in the entire league in all the clubs every year. So everyone, youth players, senior players, trainers, managers, economy, assistants, whatever you like to find, are getting educated about gambling, about risks, about responsibilities, about what's okay and not okay. Everyone. Never happened before. It's been extremely successful so far because people get aware. What are the borderlines? What is okay? What isn't okay? What do you need to look out for? Like we heard it before, playing a football game and trying to figure out who's actually cheating. But it's not only on the pitch. It's also the discussions in the dressing room. You hear things, what is okay, what is not okay. This has been really, really good for us. We set up a European fund because we want to get out in Europe. Sweden has been more or less outside Europe for a very long time. We were very much into it in the 80s, but the economy of football changed, and clubs like Gothenburg, who was actually able to win the UEFA Cup in the 80s, Malmö, who's gone to the finals, it's not going to happen anymore. We are too far behind in the economy. But this is a way of helping our clubs actually to come out, and this year, for the first year in many years, we have 2 clubs out in European championships, and Djurgården is actually gone past the group stage now. See if they go directly into the next stage or have to play an extra game, but they are first or second in their qualifying group. That hasn't happened for extremely many years, so this is a good help. We set up a system called Unicoach because one of the rules that's come up and what Unibet has been very tough on, we don't market to kids. It's a strict rule, nothing to the people under 18. And before that, we had, in the early days, we had something called Tips Elite, which was on all the arms, and Svenska Spel was very much promoted. Not Svenska Spel nor Unibet can today do that. So we focus on the coaches. We don't focus on the kids. So Unicoach is a program to better our academies, which also is funded partly by Unibet. And we get a huge effect. Suddenly we get kids that get better trainers, better resources, which is in the long run something that's going to better our teams. Very much a good thing. And of course, we're not just giving them practice facilities and better possibilities to grow as players. we also educate them in the risks of match fixing, betting, gambling, whatever. So this is a new generation coming up that is better equipped to handle the temptations in the future. There is an AI project run within Unibet where you try to sort of my origin was that I was a systems engineer specializing in artificial intelligence when I took my exam. My kids laugh at me because it was 4 years. I took my exam 4 years before they invented the internet. So that makes me a dinosaur. But I found out that the real intelligence is very much needed and has been for all my lifetime. But in this case, AI is really interesting to see, can you sort of, on an automatic level, establish patterns in behavior that shows that you are gliding over from a normal behavior to a risk behavior. This is really interesting for us because we can monitor this on our players and everything, so really nice. We try to promote the best players, managers every month. It's not directly connected to match fixing, but home club, get the fans an opportunity to sort of channelize a part of the fund directly to the club. So the club that gets the most people registering for the home club, and no, you don't have to place a bet. You can go into the website and just register and then do nothing. So there's no obligation to play or bet on Unibet. And a really important thing was due to this project, we got the possibility to place integrity officers on all the clubs. We couldn't do that before, but now we have the financing for it, and we have one for the league. It's been really effective. We have 2 cases of match fixing that has been resulted in convictions. One for a deliberate taking of a yellow card, and one for trying to rig a match. It didn't happen. The guy that took the yellow card took it, and we could afterwards establish it was rigged. But the match-fixing attempt, they were convicted just by attempt. They got so much proof on it. And we have at least, I'd say, historically, since the last 7-8 years, I think we'd had 20 odd games that were suspected of something in odds movements or suspicious activities due to the context we have. That's been the norm, and it's changed. Almedalen, we are speaking together with Unibet and politicians and the media about what's the industry going to change to and how are we going to be a part of that change. It's really interesting, like I'm doing today. It's a short version, but we can actually make a difference. So when the industry is changing from, in German it's called Raubtier, to be a predator, changing to be a responsible actor in the gaming and gambling community, we should be part of it, because that change is going to happen, and gambling is not going to go away, whatever you say. The long-term effect, I think, is we reached some really good results on match fixing. I showed on one of my last slides. We're working together on mental health, because up here, as we heard in the session before, when you are feeling outside, when you're feeling low, we are dealing with young men that are performing to their absolute max on the pitch and on the practices. Sometimes they're in the team, sometimes out. But when they leave the pitch and the club, they have a lot of spare time and not much identity other than being a star or a not so much star. So what do they do? Well, they are the perfect victims of addictions, whatever it might be, alcohol, tobacco, not tobacco I'd say, but gambling, etc. We work together with Unibet on the Road to Zero to try to establish that anyone playing on the Unibet platform at least should be 0% that have a problem with their betting. It's a tough goal to reach, I would say, but very much inspired by the ambition to do that and to publicly declare it, and we're going to do our part. Every player, every leader in every club in Sweden is registered, so they cannot play on Unibet platform. And we have a ban that no player, leader, anyone in the Swedish league can play on any team, any match in any of the 2 leagues. And it's set up in the system. So, to educate, to monitor, and create awareness about gambling, gaming, to highlight and promote and prevent abuse and destructive behavior, that creates something. It creates conditions where we can actually have a sustainable cooperation between a gambling company and us. And to summarize, we cooperated with betting companies since 1934, so it's not new to us. Our main risks, because there are risks, are mitigated through insight and interaction, because we can speak together and we can actually learn from each other. The possibility to influence, we debate and discuss what types of objects that are okay to play in our leagues. We discuss financing of integrity work, or actually we have implemented it, education and research. We set up financial resources to our clubs so they can better themselves. We promote channeling to safer licensed market instead of the unlicensed, which is, you have to realize that if some people say we should ban commercials on sports, well, what the hell is going to happen? People are going to move over to unlicensed markets. It's not going to stop. It's going to go away to parties that are not taking the same responsibility as our partners do. So we choose PC, practical commitment instead of political correctness, I think is a sort of a fun way to say it. And to end up, in 2021, only one game in our second tier was suspected and investigated for eventual match. One game instead of 25. So that trend has gone down because every player, every leader is now very much aware of what it means and where the risks are and how you can talk to someone if something happens. It's a huge success, I would say. The risks are out there. We cannot ignore them, but we can be aware. So, thank you.
Yes,
Close.
thank you, Mats. Thank you very much. Yes, and there are some questions. Well, actually, I received two. Let's start with the last one, because it's also your last slide was about the match fixing. Because the question is related to the previous session from Hubert. Do you feel that enough is being done to combat match fixing?
I'd say that we are doing it very much more now and very much together, because you have to realize match fixing is an interest that both the gambling companies and we have in common. So today it's very much into our cooperation. I would say it's a problem in the national legislation because they're not really ready for the types of problems you see with match fixing. It's very intricate and hard to prove sometimes. But we got two convictions, which has, I think, scared away a lot of people.
Okay, so lots need to be done in legislation.
I think in legislation, I think in football in Sweden, I would say that we are doing quite enough right now.
And you say thanks to Unibet, you can fight.
Yeah, without that we couldn't do it, to be quite honest.
Okay.
We'd have to do something, but not as much as we do now.
Well, we will talk further on this topic in the plenary program later on, of course. So my last question from the Menti is the Swedish Football League concerned about the exposure of gambling advertising to younger fans?
Well, I'd say that exposure will happen anyway. And it's also a choice. I mean, I can't say that it's 100% of the one way or the other, but to be honest, our opinion is that at least when it's responsible, when it's advertising that is fair, it's not directed by types of addictive advertisements. It's directed mainly to other groups than young, and you work together with a responsible company. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, because you feel that you have a kind of influence then.
We did this KI report. So we checked all the players, even our young players. We see that we have about the same risk problem as you would find in any sport. Our main concern is that under 18 there's still a problem of riskful gambling. And we know it's not on Unibet's platform. So where do they go to gamble? Where they still go to the unlicensed channel. That's what we need to break.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your story and your presentation. Give him a big hand, Mats Enqvist. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and we will move on to our third speaker. That's Brandon Dowell, Director of Security at Kindred Group. And he will talk about Want Cyber Resilience, Master the Fundamentals. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Brandon Dowell, Director of Security, Kindred Group. I'm genuinely surprised how many people are here to listen to a presentation about cybersecurity. and how it relates to sustainability. It's not an image that people typically kind of associate cybersecurity as falling in line with the sustainability field. So thank you very much for coming to listen to this. I think when people think about cybersecurity, they typically picture this sort of image. Ecological sustainability is the first thing that comes to mind. It's certainly the most existential in the line of the sustainability theme. And with cybersecurity, what we're actually looking at is protecting information assets by mitigating cyber risk. So the two don't seem to really fall hand in hand, but you can come up with any plan that you like. When you're designing your security strategy, you can come up with something that you say, I'll take on all the risks, no matter what. My risk threshold is extremely high. I'm going to weather the storm. But if you do that, there will be consequences, and this is where the sustainability aspect comes into it. So it's mitigating cyber risk without burning through your resources, predominantly your financial resources, but within that that resources part, burning out your people, right? So your people are your human resources. If you are unprepared with a poor plan, you will not have a strategic ability to implement your security controls over time. Your people will be burnt out. And finally, without burning through your emotional capital. So this might include your trust with your players, trust with your staff internally, or the kind of trust that society has with you or your regulators have with you. Now, internally, when we assess this image here is from the Kindred Group Sustainability Report from one of the years. And I say one of the years, not a specific year, because year on year we see the same kind of feedback when it comes to the areas of cybersecurity and customer data integrity. They're considered to be quite material, quite impactful, quite relevant to our stakeholders. And I don't think that this is any great surprise. I take this information from a security survey from a company called Sophos. It's a home consumer survey, so just general people. And what they say is that 91% of consumers are worried about online security threats affecting their household. And I think that would probably fall in line today if I was to ask everybody here whether or not they're concerned about some form of online threat. It's a very generic and open question. 45% believe that they're more at risk of being hit by an attack now than they were before the pandemic, because they spent 2 years hooked into the internet and starting to understand a little bit better the impact of them personally. 18% report, and this is the craziest statistic here, is that 18% report that someone in their household, not their immediate circle of friends, but their household, suffered from a ransomware attack, which is a very consequential attack. And it's not a personal level, but in an organizational level, it's just as consequential. And nearly half of those occurred in the last year, and 29% paid out the ransom. So yes, we do have a topic here that is impactful, material, and relevant. So I think the stakeholders get it right when they say that. So cybersecurity is definitely important, and it's something that you need to plan towards. But the sustainability aspect is that you have a plan, not just a plan, you have a plan that is financially sustainable for your users, both your internal staff and your players, and you, as a bonus, support other sustainability ambitions in doing so. Now, if you do these things, you will ultimately enhance trust, which is the ultimate objective of sustainable security planning. So let's look at the first point here then, financial sustainability. We have a situation now which is a bit of a cause of concern. I read a lot of security reports in my job, and if you read them all and you kind of average it out, if the reporter asks the question of, do you have a cybersecurity plan? Approximately half will not have a plan, right? Now that doesn't mean that it's completely devoid of a plan. It might just mean, based on certain criteria of what a plan should have within it, they don't meet that criteria. They might have some very responsive plan, they see things before them, and they react on it, and they consider that some aspect of cybersecurity planning. But planning, we're talking more a strategic horizon. So 50% of companies lack that strategic cybersecurity plan. Now then you throw into the mix the threat environment. So we see now, at the moment, this is globally speaking, the average cost of ransomware attacks are costing organizations $4.5 million. Now, obviously that's the large organizations that take the big hits that draws the average up. But the fact that it is this much averaged out globally is exceptional. And because ransomware is so profitable for the threat actors, it draws up the cost of total data breaches to be on par just with that ransomware alone. So ransomware in and of itself is quite dangerous. So we have then companies that are quite naive with a high threat environment. Then you throw into the mix something that's a little bit concerning also, and that is that you have these companies that provide services and products to help you, but they're providing products and services into a market that's worth 139 billion, the security market, and it's forecasted to grow to 376 by 2025. It's quite a profitable industry, which means there's a lot of junk, a lot of buzzwords, and a lot of hype, as opposed to focusing on fundamentals. So you add these things together, naive, kind of vulnerable companies, high threat environment, and the people that could assist you are also preying on you. That is a real cause of concern. You have some serious vulnerability. So unfortunately, the way out of this is nothing special and interesting. I would love to go and spend 3 days and discuss how I would structure a program for you, right? That's my bread and butter, right? That's what I enjoy. I don't have that time. What I can say is that there's fundamental aspects that you need to focus on, and that is just having a plan. It doesn't matter if you are extremely good at this, you just need to sit down and consider from the beginning, risk assessment, what are the risks that we're facing, and what are the thresholds that we would set, what can I tolerate with those risks in advance. So not the things that I'm being impacted by right now, but what else on the horizon could possibly affect me. Risk assessment is one of the most least understood topics, I think, in the field of cybersecurity. But if you do that effectively, you'll end up naturally with a strategic roadmap. Those things that you're going to work on first, and those things that you can start to implement later, those controls that you'll start to implement later. And they will aid your compliance goals. We're a regulated industry. What you'll end up finding happening is if you do risk assessment appropriately in your plan, you will meet your compliance requirements whilst also building wider resilience. You'll take yourself away from being this compliance-driven organization that just wants to get the tick in the box to actually providing security that will increase trust. You'll embrace the basics and fundamentals better because you'll understand the subject of cybersecurity better as well. Now, your plan will need to be endorsed from the top. It can't be pat on the back support, which is what is most common across most tech industries, most tech companies. There is a belief that they're supporting, but support means engagement from the top down. You'll not have siloed security organizations and security controls. You'll consolidate everything to reduce your operational expenditure. And this last point here is about what I was saying with the vendors earlier, the ones that provide the security services to you. You're not going to let the tail wag the dog, right? So trends are important. They'll come to you and tell you the latest trends and buzzwords and things that you should be implementing. But the fact of the matter is that they're just inputs to a plan that you've already created. It might slightly alter the direction, but if you find you're hearing novel things from them that totally alters your plan, then what you have is not a plan, right? You're very vulnerable to their messaging. So you create a plan, but you don't yet know if it's a sustainable plan. So I think the best place to start with understanding whether or not something is a sustainable plan for cybersecurity is how it affects your users, right? Your people that are working in the field of cybersecurity within your organization. And you measure this based on their stress, burnout, or their attrition. So if you have a plan, but you still find yourself very responsive as opposed to proactive, you're going to have a high attrition rate. You're going to end up with a poorer performance. And I take a bunch of statistics from the ISAC was a global workforce report of 2022. ISAC is a security organization. And they say that the 4th and 5th highest reasons for attrition, right now that's in the survey that they hand out to their members, is high levels of stress commonly associated with incident response, so constantly being responsive as opposed to having a better plan in foresight. And the 5th most common is poor management support. So the funny part as well, when you speak to the organizations after that, the managers, they tend to believe that they were supportive. They're not quite understanding what support means. It can't just be a pat on the back. It really needs to be a genuine core aspect of how you drive your business. And you're at a pivotal moment. If you are a vendor right now, you're at a pivotal moment. You really can't afford to lose these people, right? These statistics that were in the report, they match very closely to the statistics that we see for ourselves. The average time of finding qualified cybersecurity staff is 6 months, around about, on average. 63% of respondents indicate they have unfilled cybersecurity positions, which is up 8% from 2021. 62 report that their cybersecurity teams are understaffed. and 60% report difficulties retaining qualified cybersecurity professionals, which is up 7%. So you'll be able to see some pretty clear indicators whether or not you've implemented a sustainable plan if you start to see some of these statistics not appearing in your organization. Now, the second part about a sustainable plan is the impact of what you end up implementing. So if you make a plan whereby you say we're going to go all in very hard or do nothing at all, you're going to see a response from your user base. So if you do nothing at all, the response will be one of grief because they'll be suffering from the attacks, right? But if you do too much too quick because you haven't tried to space it out over time and you're simply responding to an incident as it occurs, you're going to end up overloading people. Good controls take time to implement and even longer to be culturally adopted. I take the example here of multi-factor authentication. I'd be surprised if you all in this room do not use multi-factor authentication with your banks. You go back, say, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, depending on the country where you're from, you perhaps didn't have that. And when it first was implemented, you were probably thinking that it's quite frustrating as of a control. But now you have some cultural adoption, it takes time for it to be implemented, and now it's quite normal. But if you were then to take that and put it on your product straight away, at the drop of a pin, because maybe a regulatory change that you were unprepared for, or that you've suffered too many incidents that you need to try to prevent, you're not going to be able to do that in such a way that is not going to be impactful for your players, or if you were to do it internally, obviously your staff. A good sustainable security plan will also support your other sustainability ambitions. This is a bit of a stretch, because to say cybersecurity is going to push all the other areas of sustainability along, I can't say that, but I can say one very clear area is that of ecological sustainability. Now, we saw over COVID the amount of people that were working from home and the amount of businesses that were unprepared for that. And I've seen in my field of cybersecurity over the last 15, almost 20 years, going from a real naysaying style of industry field to being more of a supportive field. So before you'd have the security staff or internal IT staff would say no to everything. Now you've got to realize in the absence of a good control, expect people to do the wrong thing, as opposed to you're stopping them from doing the wrong thing by saying no. So we know now that remote work is now just work. That's changed over the last 2 years. That's set. It's a very hard thing to take back. 60% of people that are working are now remote workers. 18% say they won't return to the office. And over that period, attackers exploited that fact. They were going after companies where the people were separated from their support base, and the companies that were not prepared were really suffering. But irrespective of the fact that COVID is now coming to an end, and I say that, don't hold me to that one, but it's coming to an end, companies will probably need to look at their future remote working opportunities. And then from the security perspective, obviously securing it, and in response, you'll be supporting an ecological style of working. This is the stuff I'd prefer to be talking about right now, all of the controls. I don't have time to do that, but I'm very happy for anybody to come up to me and ask me more about control building at the end of this presentation. Now, the last part of this is about enhancing trust. So this is going to focus more on the player perspective here. So how do you have a sustainable plan that enhances trust? I think it's a very broad question, and it's a very hard thing to answer. So I want to focus on a particular use case. That use case is multi-factor authentication. And we go forward with this public statement of zero compromised player accounts by 2025. So what does this include? Well, it means that we're going to try to protect our accounts through multi-factor authentication. And when I say this, most people come back with these questions of what does that mean? Does it mean that all these accounts are hacked? What is the issue here? What's actually happening? So to explain this problem, each year there are billions of records that are leaked, right? That go out there. In this 12.4 billion records that was leaked last year, there's going to be many, many accounts, like credentials, usernames and passwords. And you can go to web pages to see whether or not your credentials are in these leaks. So you could go to this one here, haveibeenpwned.com. There's 12 billion in there. You can check whether or not your credentials been leaked, right? It'll tell you, yep, your MySpace account from 2008 was compromised. So no big deal. But the issue is that those things that are leaked often are reused elsewhere. So if I go to a blog and I use a credential, I'll probably reuse that credential on, say, Unibet unibet.com, which is now problematic because my account that was compromised on some local blog is now also compromised at Unibet. When people hear this, they typically say, why would a hacker come after me personally? But they're not coming after you personally. They're taking these billions of accounts that they can take from the internet, they're putting into these password lists, and they've got these huge networks of compromised computers. It could be your home computer, it could be a work computer. You'd never really know unless it got picked up by some antivirus or something like this. And they send messages to these computers to then go out to the websites. They say, can you go and try to log into this account for me, please? And it tries to log in, and it will come back and say, this account was successful and this account was not successful. So now they've got lists of people that they can get into and lists that they can't. From those, they can come back and do some form of fraud. This is a very crude example here, loading it up with stolen credit cards to get money out at the end. So this is where multi-factor authentication comes into play, because you break that attack chain. You used to have the username and password, but then you also ask for another factor, which is your phone, and that allows you into the site. So when we have the multi-factor authentication on the last part here, we've stopped the attack chain and we've protected that individual. It's kind of a philosophical question. How much responsibility does an individual have, and how much support does the company give? The way I see it, there will be regulatory change around this, and that we want to be on the head of the curve. That is a sustainable plan, not trying to respond at the last minute. The key takeaway from this is, unfortunately, quite an obvious point. You need to plan. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So the meat that's on the bones here is a discussion I'd have to have personally with anybody that wants to ask more questions about it. But in general, if you plan ahead of time, you'll have an opportunity to assess your risk and have a better strategic roadmap. Make sure it incorporates these things. If your manager's here, please support the plan. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Brandon. Yes, we also received 2 questions for you. Let me start with the first one. As cybercrime becomes more sophisticated, how can companies protect themselves? Well, make a plan.
Yeah, I think, yeah, exactly.
I mean, this is your whole presentation, of course, but maybe the second part of the question, how can they make employees aware?
Yeah, good point. I think it goes back to the slide that I said. It is about planning. It's about if you have a time horizon and you're implementing controls over time based on what your risks are, employees are then immersed with it, and over time you get cultural adoption and penetration. So something that might seem very non-obvious today, in 3 or 4 years' time, they'll be doing it instinctively, not realizing it's just because you had a better time horizon to introduce them to something. If you go too hard, too quick, they'll be resentful, and that you won't get a very effective change.
Okay, so do it step by step.
Absolutely, yeah.
But also quickly.
No, I wouldn't say anything should happen quickly. You should have already thought about it in advance. That's what you really need to go. It's already too late if the incident's occurred. It needs to happen in advance.
Okay, thank you for this answer. And then the last question is, are customers now more or less likely to trust gambling operators with their data?
Based on what the companies are doing?
Yes, or based on that cybercrime becomes more sophisticated, or that is happening even more now?
I think what we see when we have feedback about the brands, what we offer them, they have a high level of trust. I think, because the question is about what the player thinks, and I really don't want to speak on their behalf. I speak on behalf of an operator here, and I say, we should do more, right? There's more that we can do in our planning. And those that work in this field, my field, need to be better at explaining the problem to try to get buy-in and adoption over time, gradually implement the controls. I think we should try to get away a little bit from what we expect the player to think and feel, and really instead take the knowledge that we have to build up the controls that should be there for them, and then they can instinctively know that this is a place that I can trust.
But you also need the player to actually fight cybercrime.
The player themselves, I mean, what they should be doing is enjoying the product. They shouldn't have to think about the challenges of the cybercrime. That's our responsibility.
That's your responsibility.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your story. Brandon Dowell, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and we're going to our last keynote for this session, Partnering for Change. And that's Christina Thakor-Rankin. You're a principal consultant, 7010 Gaming, that's right, yes. And you're going to talk about equality and diversity in sports and sports betting. The floor is yours.
I am indeed, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm very conscious of the fact that I stand between you and lunch. I have 50 slides, 15 minutes, so let's crack on. We're going to talk about why I think the Women's World Cup is going to be bigger than the men's. Number of reasons. The rise in women's sport, new role models, the rise of the female sports bettor, what the new normal looks like. And anything new is an opportunity for revenue. It also comes with new risks. Firstly, the rise in women's sports. Last report conducted by Nielsen showed that 84% of sports fans, male and female, are interested in women's sports. Of those sports, the fastest growing on the planet is women's football or soccer. Some of that is down to the fact that this team is the current World Cup champion. But when we take a deep dive into FIFA's own figures, the last World Cup final had over 1 billion viewers. When we start to break that down, some of this was TV, some of this was live streaming. When we look at where the activity is happening, it is global. Now, according to FIFA, up until 2019, they had seen figures doubling, tournament upon tournament. When we look at the matches which were the most popular, we've got the US, Netherlands, France, England, Italy. You look at that list, they are all regulated betting jurisdictions. You can see for yourself the final last year, 82 million live audience viewing figures. If we take FIFA's own predictions and say the next World Cup, 2023, we will see a double of that 82 million. That's going to be a conservative estimate of 160 million viewers. Super Bowl is typically 120 million. So in the US, the Women's World Cup potentially is going to be more popular than the Super Bowl. We've had the Euros recently. Somehow, England won. And again, we started to see more records being broken. And the records being broken were the records set by the men's game. The women's Euro final had the highest ever attendance figure for a European match. Women's sport is now beating those records set by the men's game. Another reason, we now have new role models. Some of you will be familiar with this story. Norway's volleyball team decided, we're not playing in our pants anymore. We want shorts. They kind of went on strike. One, they scored a goal for women's equality and women's rights. Two, they brought in a whole bunch of new female fans to the game. Now, these were female fans who didn't wake up and say, I'm going to go play volleyball. It's because they supported what the Norwegian volleyball team was doing. They supported them because they supported women. As a result of which, volleyball got a huge number of new fans. Betting operators got a whole bunch of new customers. Norway was also one of the first ones to say, we're going to pay our female national teams the same as our male teams. In Canada, there is now a bit of an outcry that the merchandising for the women's game is a much lower quality and a lower level than the men's game. This conversation has upped the ante a little bit because Canada are the current Olympic gold medal holders. And the big one was the USA earlier this year, where after a 6-year battle, the national team finally got equal pay. And what was interesting is back in 2019 when they won, the chant from the crowd was not USA, it was not we are the champions, it was equal pay. And not just in the Western world. Saudi Arabia has made women's soccer part of its key Vision 2030 diversification problem. A few years ago when they said to the world, we're liberalizing, they said women could do 3 things. They could drive a car, they could go to the movies, they could go to a football match. They have now got a new national women's league. They brought in a coach from the Bundesliga, and they intend to use women's soccer as a springboard for their bid for the Asia Cup. And one of the most hardline countries in the world, Iran, now has a women's soccer team. Those 5 fans are not men. They are young women who are risking public flogging, public execution to go and watch a football game. Football Manager once said, football is not a matter of life and death. It is way more important than that. Certainly is now for the women's game. This is Iran's football team. National scandal a couple of years ago, where over half of the team were accused of being men. Apparently, it all started when number 10 ran on the pitch and somebody went, that does not look right. They did an official investigation. Iran decided it was fine. They were not ringers. They were allowed to play because they were going through gender reassignment surgery. This is Iran using women's soccer as a platform for having a conversation about gender reassignment. We now have the rise of the female sports bettor. This is where Europe is lagging behind. A couple of years ago, research in the US suggested up to 43% of sports bettors were women. Hot Paper Lantern did a little bit of research more recently. And they have predicted somewhere around 33% of sports bettors are female. The motivation to some extent is the same. Where they are slightly different from the men is they are far more into the social side of things. They will follow trends. They will also be more likely to download analytical apps. Anecdotally, they also do better as customers, as punters, than their male equivalents. Most recent study, earlier this year, looked at a bit more data. FanDuel managed to, in the last kind of year, acquire 1.7 females. DraftKings, around 900,000. The most interesting result was from Rush Interactive. They did a bit of analysis of their database, and over 50% of their sports bettors are female. This trend continues in the US. Women will be your primary sportsbook demographic. We don't have research from Europe at the moment, but probably we should start looking at this. Maximbet have now switched tack. Why go out and pay for sponsorship for the male teams? It's expensive. Go support the women's teams. And they recently hired Nicki Minaj as their ambassador for Maximbet. That is not so they can appeal to the male sports punter. When we start to put all of this together, our perception of normality changes. This is what the world is starting to look like now. But for this generation, win does not mean money. It's about coming together. It's about the experience. Women supporting women. It's about being connected. It's about not missing out. We've always looked at sports betting to be something like this. But actually, the stats are now showing it's looking more and more like this. Of course, new customer demographic, there's opportunities of revenue. There are also risks. If you're an operator, you're looking at a new customer demographic. You're looking at advertising, marketing, sponsorship opportunities, which are far more cost-effective than the male target audience and male teams. You're also looking at lower acquisition and retention costs. This is about community, about prizes, not necessarily cash. There are also risks. Everything we've heard today about betting integrity has been about the men's game. If I'm a match fixer, why would I go for the men's game? You're watching it. It's expensive. Go for the women's game. Betting is increasing. It's going to be cheaper. But there's a massive loophole. Your traders are going to have conscious bias. Women aren't supposed to be able to catch or throw. If there's a foul on the pitch, is it a deliberate foul or is it PMS? And then there's reputational marketing issues. How are you going to do this? You could do it that way, or your marketing teams might choose to do it this way. My experience, don't think pink. Don't stick on a pair of stilettos, because for this generation and this group, it's about equality. It's about holding their own. You do need to think about the social and the community side. This age group is 24 upwards, and it's Generation Z that is fueling it. Most importantly, you need to remember everything we know about sports betting is based on a male demographic. We need to start rethinking sports betting and problem gamblers. 2023 is a perfect storm. We have this aligned with this. For the first time ever, we are going to have women from every single continent come together in one place. Last time this happened was this. And they did not have China, and they certainly didn't have women from the Middle East. As far as all of you are concerned, women's sport, female sports bettors are here, and they are here to stay. We, as an industry, need to start to deal with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Great story. You're actually the first woman talking on this conference.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
They've always said
No
I'm
women in
more
the
of a
panels?
boy. Well, I think, again, it's perception, isn't it? Women tend to do the nurturing roles, the social responsibility, the legal and compliance. Bingo.
But I also see less women here and in the audience. So are there less women working in the betting industry, the gambling industry?
For the first time ever, I would say yes. So one of the things I do is we measure levels of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the industry, using something called the All Index. For the first time ever last year, the number of women coming into the industry has dropped below 50%.
Oh, is it?
Which is scary because your sportsbook demographic is now switching to 50% plus female.
Yes. Do you know what the reason is why it's dropped?
Generation Z predominantly. Gen Z, those people who are kind of under the age of 25 and coming into the industry, they expect diversity and equality amongst their employers and working environments. If, as an industry, you look predominantly male and white, why would they come work for you?
Yes. So they missed the train, could you say it? The industry itself?
That's a very good point. We're very much at risk of missing the train. If we run now, we might just make it.
Okay, so we have to run.
We have to run.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Well, I also have some questions from our audience with the Menti, the Q&A. Given the global scale of women's football, when will the value of commercial agreements match the men's game? What do you think?
I think if you're an operator, you have a window of opportunity, and that window of opportunity is probably about 6 months. Because I think as soon as you've got the Women's World Cup, that is going to shift things massively. Especially when you look at the fact that a lot of the European teams, the women's team is better than the men's team. So if you're from the Netherlands, if you're from Germany, you're from Norway, you want to get bang for your sponsorship buck, go for the team that's more likely to win.
Yes. But that would be the logical answer, but what do you expect?
That is what I expect.
Okay, also that's also realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, then the last question, because you already stressed that women actually bet more often than men. So are women more addictive in gambling than men?
We don't know yet.
No, because all the research is done on men.
Exactly.
Okay, but what do you expect? I mean,
we're at the start of the conversation. One, there's the community side of things, and we know what it's like. Twitter, Insta, you've got to be involved, otherwise you're not part of the crowd. So the chances are, if all your friends are doing it, you're going to do it. Which means, you might maybe have bet once in a blue moon, but suddenly it's part of a group activity, so you're going to do it more often. And the other thing is, women are using analytical tools and apps. So they're coming at it on a basis of skill, judgment, and opinion, which then means it's not gambling, it's not chance. It was your opinion against somebody else's. And if it's an opinion, you're going to try again because you want to be proven right.
okay, but more research has to be done then.
Absolutely
also
right,
on
Mum.
the behavior
Yes.
of women, gambling women.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Christina Thakor-Rankin, for your TED Talk, for your speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes. Well, and thank you all for listening and participating by the chat, the Q&A function. It's lunchtime now for the people that are live here in Amsterdam, and we will start our plenary program at 2:45, if I say it correct. No, 1:45. So we hope to see you all back at the plenary program. And for the people online, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for sharing all your thoughts and questions by the Q&A, and hope to see you next year at Sustainable Gambling Conference 2023. Goodbye and have a very nice day.